Hey guys, welcome to my second orchid mounting video. Now, I just showed you a whole video talking FAQ about mounting and how to do it and showing what to do. And if you missed that, just go click the link right here and you can watch that video. But for now, let's talk about mounting my Bulbophyllum Fascinator orchid. Now this orchid, I decided to switch the mount, and the mount in the last video is actually the mount that this orchid was on, but it was such a big mount for such a small orchid. And of course orchids grow, but I think I wanted to try something different with my Bulbophyllum, so I wanted to show you what I'm doing today. I'm not an expert at mounting Bulbophyllum orchids, so this isn't expert advice, this is just Astrid's exploratory Bulbophyllum mounting advice, so take it with a grain of salt. Additionally, I wanted to show you on my Bulbophyllum, we have new growth. Now whether this is a spike or an actual new pseudobulb, I don't know. I really want it to be a spike, but I'm just gonna guess that it's probably a new pseudobulb, and that's okay too, but that's exciting to see. We can see that this Bulbophyllum additionally is growing from this direction, oldest bulb back here, to newest one up here. Another thing interesting about Bulbophyllums is that they have this very wandering growth pattern. The rhizome of the plant that grows between each bulb tends to be very long in a lot of Bulbophyllums, though Bulbophyllums are extremely diverse, and there's so many that you can't say any generalizations about a Bulbophyllum, except you know that they're all the same genera. Alright, so now that we've seen the orchid, let's look at what we're going to do. So a lot of people say that Bulbophyllums do well rather than on the top of a mount. They do well in kind of this little dug in hollow. They like to also sit on top of sphagnum moss, so I wanted to see what would happen if I just had a sitting Bulbophyllum mount rather than a standing one. And I wanted to see what will happen if I put the Bulbophyllum like people advise, which is in this hollowed out concave area rather than on this forward leaning convex area. So let's get started. What do we want to do? Well, we need to have, again, our string, our scissors, we need to have our mount and our plant, and we need to have, I like to use wet sphagnum moss. So now that we have all these things, we can go ahead and get started. So Bulbophyllums seem to like to sit on top of sphagnum moss, so this mounting video is going to be a little bit different than the last one I showed you. So what we're going to do is start the mount in the same way that I typically start mounts, which maybe you don't know my way yet. But we're just going to take the string and wrap it around the mount like this. This string is clear and invisible, so it's hard to see, but I'm sure you'll understand. Just tie it around here and tie a few knots down so it's really secure. Also, we're going to leave the tail on the string because we're going to need that later on to tie down the loose end of our string when we're done mounting this. So just keep this tail, and we're going to put some moss on now. Whoops. Okay, so the moss, bulbos like to be on top of moss, as I've been told, so I'm going to lay down kind of a relatively thick layer of sphagnum moss right here in this hollow. If you make it too thick, you run the risk of attracting fungus gnats, and I hate those guys. So I'm just going to do it big enough to fill out this hollow here. Can you see that? All that nice moist sphagnum moss. And then it's very simple. So when you're wrapping the string, keep the string close to your hand. And we're just going to wrap and wrap and wrap and wrap. And because the orchid isn't on here, you don't want to wrap it too many times because you want the orchid to have lots of contact with the moss. So just do enough to get the moss in place so it's not falling off while you're trying to work with it. Now we can do something fun with Bulbophyllums, which is decide where we want to position them. So you can say what's going to look the best, what's going to happen, and I actually like the idea of this Bulbophyllum kind of creeping around the side of this mount and growing to the other side. So I'm going to kind of aim it this way, and as it grows I'll train it to wrap around this mount because I think that would be pretty interesting and cool. Okay, so I'm getting my string back under control. and we're going to wrap over each rhizome here. So we're just going to wrap over this one, and this one, and this one. And now our plant's kind of in place, but we want it to be extra sturdy, extra stable, and holding on very tightly. So we're going to just keep wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. Eventually your plant is going to bond itself down to this mount, so you can probably cut the strings off someday and clear them out so they don't look so messy. But for now it's just going to be a little bit stringy looking, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. Okay, so now I'm going to do a wiggle test of my plant. Is the plant wobbly on this mount? No, not really. I can just do this and it feels stable, so that's a good sign. But because bulbophyllums are moisture-loving orchids, I'm going to lay just a little bit more sphagnum moss over the tops of the roots so that it will always have some little level of hydration around them. I don't want it to be constantly exposed to open air. Alright, so we got this little bit here. Ew, there's a hair in it. My hair. We're going to take this little bit and put it here. And then I'm just going to, in a minute, I'm going to put some around the new growth area. But we're just going to go wrap and wrap and wrap and wrap again. So we make sure like the ends of the moss are held down so they don't get unruly. And see, we'll shake it, it's staying in place. And then I'm going to put a little bit of sphagnum moss right in this area because the new growth is crawling its new roots down here, and I want to give it something to hold on to and be also moistened with. So we're just going to throw some on here, and wrap that on. We're almost done. This is like the easiest thing in the world to do. Okay, so now we've got an orchid that's mounted. This I could actually drill a hole in and hang it up right here on wire if I wanted to, or I could just have this sitting on my shelf just like this. And I might try it sitting on the shelf for a while. That could be interesting. We also have the plant totally stable, not wobbly on the mount. That will make it happier to send out new roots. And we have it with an appropriate level of sphagnum moss that's not so thick that it will hopefully not attract fungus gnats, but not so thin that it's going to dry out every time we turn around. So before I quit, let's tie this off. I'm going to turn our mount over and find that tail I told you about. Alright, here's our little tail and here's the end of our string. So we're going to use scissors and cut the string. And then we're just going to tie this down nice and tight. And do several knots like this. And there you have it. It's a cool little mounted Bulbophyllum Fascinator. I hope someday this will bloom for me, and I hope it appreciates how I mounted it. Do a good job for me, little Bulbophyllum. Do a good job. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I am not an expert on Bulbophyllums, but I'll do my best to answer some questions if you have them down below. So let me know and have a nice day. Bye guys.